Remembrance Day, lest we forget, it's a time to remember the many sacrifices paid by our soldiers to allow us to enjoy the freedoms we have today. It's also a time to review how our society and government treats veterans and their families. Joining me now is Wayne King. He is a retired Canadian Forces colonel and service officer for the Lethbridge Royal Canadian Legion. Wayne, so great to have you on today. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Wayne, when did you first enlist in the armed forces and what motivated you to get involved?
Enlisted in 1959 in the Royal Canadian Air Force, straight from high school, and I had always had great interest in the Air Force and the work that the Air Force did on behalf of whatever action was ongoing.
Okay, we talked a little bit off camera. And what were some of the things that you did? You actually have been to some of these countries, but you were more involved in taking some of the soldiers over, right?
Yes, that's quite right. Initially, I started out as a training officer, and then later on flew with the Air Defense Command in Bagotville, Quebec, and following that staff tour in Ottawa, then I switched to transport, C-130s, and in that particular role, I flew a number of missions, both search and rescue, but also worldwide logistical support, Middle East, Far East, South America, as well as Africa. So it was really a worldwide role. Yes, it was a great experience. I also flew the C-141 Starlifter with the United States Air Force out of Charleston. And that, again, a worldwide logistical support role.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely fascinating. And of course, when we think of military, oftentimes we think of war. War is never pleasant, but some believe that it's necessary at times, of course. So can you talk about the importance of fighting for freedom?
Well, the history of the world, certainly the history of Canada, shows the immense involvement of the citizens of the country and the sacrifice that those individuals gave in defense of freedom. You're quite right. War is never a pleasant thing, nor never a desired thing to be involved in, because of the tremendous costs, both in terms of human sacrifice as well as financial. But occasionally, when situations arise such as that setting off the Second World War, it becomes necessary to defend one's freedoms and so on with armed force. And in that context, the nation must be ready to respond to those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a challenge it is. Now, this is the 100th anniversary of the poppy. Maybe can you talk a little bit about that or share a little bit of the history of the poppy? It's such an important symbol of Remembrance Day.
It is. The history of the poppy itself starts in about 1919, following the cessation of hostilities in World War I. And it started in France, but within a very, very short period of time, in fact, about 2 years, the use of the poppy as a symbol of honoring and recognizing the sacrifices of those who served spread worldwide and was also adopted here in Canada. And it is now 100 years that since that symbol has been utilized in Canada. And it is one that we at the Royal Canadian Legion want to honor, and we would like to see everyone wearing a poppy, such as yourself and the poppy I have on my tunic. But It's a symbol that does recognize the sacrifice and the contribution of our armed forces and those first responders, police and other first responders to the
Absolutely.
maintenance of our freedoms.
Yes, very important. Now, you mentioned how important it is to wear the poppy. So, how do you think that we're doing this year compared to other years when it comes to the number of people in Lethbridge, say, and other areas actually wearing poppies? Are the numbers going up or down? What do you think? What are you seeing?
I think right now, of course, we're going through a very difficult period with COVID-19, and it's rather difficult to judge with any precision whether the number of citizens out there are actually wearing the poppy compared to other years. But I do know that in normal years, the poppy organizations, the poppy group within the Legion here in Lethbridge, usually obtain tens of thousands of the poppies, which we like to see given out to the citizens of our country. This year, we obtained 55,000 of the poppies, and we'd like to see all of those distributed and worn. I haven't seen much change in the way or in the numbers of people wearing the poppy from prior years, but that might be because of the effects of COVID-19.
I know the pandemic seems to have an effect on everything, doesn't it? No matter what it is.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Wayne, how well are we doing with younger generations remembering? Do we need to do more to help our kids appreciate the sacrifices made from our freedoms? I know it's hard when you think of young kids remembering because really they're not remembering, they're just kind of more honoring or thinking about it. How do you think we're doing with that?
Well, we can always do better. I think we're doing all right, but you're quite right in that the younger generation, if they want to learn about armed forces and learn a bit about what caused Second World War, for example, and what happened during that, they really have to go into what for them is very much a history book. For the older generations, those memories are more personal.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a very different criteria when we're dealing with the youth. But it is important that we make sure the youth understand the critical importance that the older generations made in terms of defending our freedoms and preserving our way of life, not only here in Canada, but throughout the democratic nations of the world.
Now, speaking of youth, there was a 14-year-old in Chestermere, Alberta, that came up with this idea of having the city paint poppies on the crosswalk that leads to the cenotaph. But apparently, it stirred up a little bit of controversy when the Canadian Legion responded that it would be disrespectful if people stepped on the poppies. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, you're right. It was a bit of a controversy, and I must thank that 14-year-old youth who thought of the idea. I do not personally view the fact that the poppies were painted on a crosswalk and people walked on them as they crossed the road as a indication of disrespect either for the veteran or the poppy. I think anything that increases awareness of the role that the veteran played in our society and the critical importance of maintaining that remembrance and maintaining the support for the veteran is good for our nation and good for the veteran community.
Definitely.
So I don't agree with the criticisms leveled at that particular move. I think it was a good move, and I certainly believe that a majority of the veterans in our community would agree with that.
Yeah, I think it sounded like a great idea, and it's a great way to, kind of have that visual reminder too, like you were saying. So, when people buy a poppy to support veterans, where does the money go, Wayne?
Well, first of all, just by way of correction, no one can buy a poppy. Poppies are not for sale. We freely give them to anybody who wishes to have them. and we certainly advocate that they do so and wear the poppy proudly. The contributions, the donations that are generated as a consequence are put into a trust fund and are used in direct support of the veterans whenever a veteran runs into particular short-term problems, such as health problems, which might cause them to lose employment or fall behind in their utility payments, that type of thing. So the poppy funds help in that regard. They also are used to support veterans who might be residents in our various care homes around the city. There are quite a number of them, and we have well over 100 veterans in residence in those facilities. And the Poppy Fund is used to obtain necessary support equipment for the veterans who are there when that particular facility doesn't have the means of acquiring them. So it's used in a variety of ways, and but is very critical in terms of maintaining the help necessary for the veteran.
Yeah, well, you're mentioning helps for veterans. So, what kinds of needs and challenges are these older veterans facing right now?
It's a variety of problems that they face. Some of it arises directly out of the fact that they served in many cases in combat zones. I would venture to say that even though it's not necessarily readily apparent, such as the loss of a limb, but mentally, veterans who come back from areas like Afghanistan and so on often find that they have elements of PTSD, post-traumatic impact from what they have witnessed, what they have undergone while they're in theater. And that sort of thing can be very, very debilitating. It causes difficulties in the home, difficulties in the individual veteran's life, his ability to acquire and maintain employment and support his family, as would normally be the case. And some of the work that we do provides direct, ongoing support for those suffering PTSD. And it's not only true of the veteran who is in a theater of conflict, it's also true of many of our other veteran communities, such as the RCMP, who spent decades involved in strife. They might have been injured during investigation of a traffic accident or domestic dispute, that type of thing. And so the RCMP is very definitely part of our veteran community.
Definitely. And I think people sometimes forget about that, to think about those first responders. I understand that another major complaint of it's very common among veterans to feel that the length of time that it takes to get disability benefit decisions from Veterans Affairs Canada, it can be a challenge. Has that improved any?
Well, it's certainly an ongoing problem. It hasn't been resolved in any marked degree so far. Similarly, though, I don't believe it has gotten worse lately. It's a situation that I hope the government continues to spend a good deal of time and effort trying to resolve, so that the veteran who comes forward and substantiates a disability as a result of service can, within a reasonable time frame, expect some support, which is part of the program. If it is delayed too long, then the veteran understandably gives up hope that he is going to get the support that he is entitled to as a consequence of having served our country in a theater of conflict. I sincerely hope that the improvement continues, because it is critical to the welfare of the veteran community.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we have all these sad stories kind of about veterans, kind of the challenges that they face. But what would you say to a young person watching right now who might be considering a career in the armed forces? What would you say? Like, it's a chance to see the world?
Well, yeah, I would say to that individual that a chance to join the forces, if they are so inclined, is an opportunity for service to our country, service to our community. I wouldn't key it to the fact that you might see the world and so on. You can do that as an individual just as well as having joined the military for that purpose. The purpose of joining the armed forces is to react or act on the feeling that you wish to serve your community, serve your country. And that really, to me, is the principal motivating action. I would suggest, however, certainly in my case, if I were a younger individual, I would certainly join up again. I would do it all over again without any hesitation. It's been good for me, and ultimately, I think it would be good for those who do join.
Amazing. Wayne King, retired Canadian Forces Colonel and Service Officer with the Lethbridge Royal Canadian Legion. Thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciated having you on.
You're very welcome. Yep, thank you.
Absolutely. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.